There are supposedly pressure points all around the globe that somehow connect the Earth to Saturn. And it is theorized that fallen angels come from Saturn and travel through the wormhole.
You're traveling through to another dimension. A dimension of not only paranoia and delusion, but of idiocy. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of pure ignorance. Your next stop, the batshit crazy zone.
How's it going, guys? White Rabbit here. Like I keep telling you guys over and over again.
You're going to keep telling us this over and over,
over and over
and over and over again?
Over and over again. Once you wake up and learn about all of the satanic symbolism and what's really going on in this world and who's really pulling the strings.
No, what you actually mean is the symbolism that you infer that is satanic. One of the great benefits of this fantastic intelligence of ours is that we see patterns in things. We see associations with things. It's just the way that our minds are set up. So just because you see pyramids or cubes or circles doesn't mean anything except that you are perceiving cubes, squares, and circles. The rest of all of this bullshit that you're going to be spewing throughout this video is all bullshit that came out of either your demented, stupid, moronic mind or some other conspiracy idiot's mind.
It is almost impossible to turn on the television and not see all of this stuff constantly bombarding the average viewer. I woke up this morning and flipped through the channels and stumbled across the movie Avatar. Now, I haven't seen this movie since it came out in theaters, and at that time I was not awake. But I remember my impression of the movie at the time was positive.
You weren't awake? I thought you said you woke up and watched the movie.
I woke up this morning and flipped through the channels and stumbled across the movie Avatar. Now, I haven't seen this movie since it came out in theaters, and at that time I was not awake.
So now you're telling us that you weren't actually awake? You were still dreaming? I'm confused already.
I thought it had a good message, I thought it had a good story, and I thought overall it was a really good movie and a good...
Avatar is basically kind of what a lot of other movies have been. The out-of-control technology that is just raping the earth for resources and our natural animalistic association with the earth and our need for protecting it so that we can survive as a species. Basically, these two things we have been at odds with ourselves for the past 100 years, ever since the Industrial Revolution. We still quite haven't found that exact balance between the natural world, which we need to survive, and technology, which makes our life easier. So we're always kind of at odds with one or the other. But basically, you take away all the trees, you take away clean water, life on this earth ceases to exist, and so do we. So, yeah, we kind of need to take care of the earth a little bit.
Intentioned movie too. Well, like I said, flipping through the channels this morning, and they were playing it on TV. And I watched only a few minutes of it to realize there are some serious underlying messages going on in this movie.
You mean you associated certain messages that you believe are in the movie. You saw something into it. You associated and you saw symbolism into it. Okay, interesting. What did you perceive in it? What did you associate with this movie?
And that's what I want to talk to you guys today about. So let's get into it. With a movie as jam-packed with occult and satanic symbolism as this one...
Again, there is no occult or satanic symbolism in the movie. You are looking and you are seeing and you are perceiving and associating whatever it is that you believe is occult and satanic into it. And as we get further into this movie review of yours, or whatever it is that you're doing with this movie, we're going to see that all the stuff that you are perceiving is your own bullshit that some other conspiracy idiot create, or you created, and you are associating with this movie. It is dealing with a lot of these truthers or conspiracy nuts is kind of like seeing them build straw men that they can use to build other straw men. It doesn't make any sense. They make up bullshit lies to further bullshit and lies. So it's like this perpetual circle jerk. It's just ridiculous.
Clearly is. I almost don't even know where to begin. So let's first start by examining the opening sequence.
I was free. Sooner or later, though, you always have to wake up.
Yep, just as you would expect. Right in the opening scene, they clearly make it known that the Illuminati have a heavy hand in this film. Of course, we already knew that. Just look at the budget that they spent on this film.
All right, let's just start this whole stupid thing on the right foot. The Illuminati eye that everybody sees in Hollywood, that people are covering up or giving some kind of a hand sign for, this whole thing that, well, basically just people are messing with you and probably at this point just playing a game with you, going, oh, if I color one eye over, they're going to associate me with the Illuminati, and it's going to be more sales for me because more people are going to be talking about me. At this point, stars, they're using you. They are using your stupid association with this eye of the Illuminati. But if you actually look back at where the Illuminati began, the Bavarian Illuminati, which was kind of a in-your-face to the Jesuit education system at the time, which is controlled by the church, they didn't use the actual Illuminati in Bavaria, did not use this eye symbol. The eye in the pyramid is something that got associated with them later on. They didn't have this symbol, nor did they use it. A link is below for more information on this.
There is no way that Hollywood, which is roughly translated to the witch's wand, by the way.
But as for a witch's wand, no. There could be two different meanings behind holly. One could be holly, as in the wood, or it could be holy, or holy wood. As for a witch's wand, the traditional materials that are associated with a witch's wand is hazel, witch hazel, a hazel wand. So holly, although I'm sure somebody could make a wand out of holly, it's not the traditional witch's wood to make a wand with.
Would spend the kind of money that it did on this major blockbuster film and not have a giant hand in it. On the surface, this movie is about an outsider representing an imperial state who steps literally into the shoes of the indigenous people and through a journey of self-discovery comes to understand and sympathize with them.
Again, it is directed at the individual to find that balance between the faceless industrial complex and the survival of it, and the understanding that we need the earth to protect it, its humanity and artistic nature within us, kind of like this left brain, right brain, this constant kind of conflict that we still have today.
Now, obviously, on a level, this movie is clearly art reflecting life, and the evil imperial state in this movie, in more ways than one, is a direct representation of America. But I want to dig a little deeper into this movie and get to the actual symbolism in this movie, so...
You mean the symbolism that you're seeing in the movie? Okay, it would be interesting to see what you are reading into this movie.
Let me point out some very significant symbology that I want you guys to understand when looking at this movie. First, this movie takes place on an alien planet called Pandora. Now, in Greek mythology, And again, all of the occult and satanic symbolism derive from Babylon.
I think the Greek people, and I think quite a few people would take quite offense to you associating the Greek mythologies with Satanism. Not that there's anything wrong with Satanism. There are a lot of respected Satanists who practice Satanism. But Greek mythology is Greek mythology. You can't just associate everything under the umbrella of Satanism. Greek mythology is Greek mythology. Roman mythology is Roman mythology. Period.
Including Greek mythology and all the other different mythologies around the world. But in Greek mythology, Pandora was the very first woman who was formed out of clay by the gods. She also released all of the evils of mankind. She is the satanic representation of Eve from Genesis.
No. Eve is the Eve represented in the Bible. Pandora is the Greek god from Greek mythology that opened Pandora's box and all of the evils of the world was released. Greek mythology, biblical mythology. Two separate things, no association.
So what does this mean? Well, I'm sure you've also heard of Pandora's box. Now, the box is a cube, which is a representation of Saturn. So in this movie, when we have a planet named Pandora, it is in a way a representation of Saturn, a Luciferian satanic planet or entity.
No. No. Pandora's box is Pandora's box from Greek mythology. The cube and Saturn have absolutely no association in the occult. I don't know who pulled this out of their fucking ass, who associated this, but the cube has absolutely nothing to do with Saturn. I have questioned people about this and I read on this. I've tried to figure out exactly where this moronic, stupid association came from. And the only thing that I have heard is that somebody said, well, there's a 6-pointed hexagram in the top of Saturn. If you look at the picture, it kind of looks like a 6-pointed cube. That's the only reason why these morons associate the cube with Saturn. The cube does have an occult symbolism, but it doesn't have anything to do with Saturn. Saturn is associated with 3. Saturn is associated with Saturn, and then the planet Saturn. The cube has absolutely nothing to do with Saturn.
In other words, what the occult are saying with this movie is that the origins of this movie and the indigenous people presented in this movie are formed from and live in a satanic world.
No, that is completely your perception. That is your projection onto this. Again, it is the way that you are interpreting this movie and interpreting these symbols, and you are also misinterpreting symbols to twist and fit your own narrative.
Everything in this movie comes from satanic beliefs. And it is no coincidence that these indigenous people are so big. They are literally giants. What does that have to do with anything? Well, if we refer back to the book of Genesis, God tells us that there were giants in those days. What he is referring to is crossbreeding between fallen angels and the other forms of life on this planet, mainly humans.
Wow, so it's really amazing that you have the insight to interpret what the Bible actually means when it talks about giants. I find that really amazing that you have such an insight. However, giants appear in nearly every single mythology throughout the entire world, and so do diminutive creatures. So there's always this idea of these giant beings either being giant beings that are out of control or menacing and destroying, and so the hero, who's usually smaller than that, has to overcome it. Is this starting to kind of click? Are you beginning to understand the symbolism of this? The idea that there is something huge, menacing, that's out of your control, and somehow finding through intelligence or cunning or some kind of a special tool that you're able to overcome the situation and essentially defeat the giant? Are you seeing the association, symbolism, meaning of this? No? Okay, let's get back to your Saturn cube, Pandora's box, whatever it is that you are associating.
In this intermingling between the fallen angels and humans, along with other animals, were formed these giant creatures. And these giant creatures have a demonic spirit. That's where demons come from. I want you to also notice that these giant indigenous people, these avatar, are not just giants, they're also cat-like, which jumps back to, of course, the Egyptians. Now, all throughout the movie, they have these indigenous people worshiping their deity in occult pagan rituals.
Again, Western thought or Western belief has this kind of, heaven belief, or this heaven idea, this heaven analogy. So what this means is that, you see, this earth is, in this heaven hypothesis, is temporary. It's not real. It's kind of like fake. Before you get to the actual heaven where you go up with God and you live there eternally forever in the heaven, the second coming, the whatever it is, but it's not the earth. The earth is just kind of, it's basically something for us to use and abuse while we're here until we'll eventually be saved. Now, throughout the rest of the world, and especially for indigenous cultures and a lot of shamanistic beliefs, the earth is sacred. The earth is it. You don't go anywhere else. You're kind of here. The earth gives you oxygen to breathe. The earth gives you water to drink. The earth gives you the land that you can grow your food and that other animals can eat. And then you can then consume the plants or consume the animals. So it is a symbiotic relationship. It is a mother that essentially nurtures and takes care of you. And in return, you honor, respect, and care for that mother. So you take care of the earth takes care of you. You take care of the earth takes care of you. So that is where this idea of these avatars and what you're calling these pagan ceremonies is coming from. It's actually coming from a very scientifically founded and realistic approach in understanding of our dependence upon the earth. This is not just some kind of a temporary way station before we move on to heaven for us to abuse and destroy. If we abuse and destroy the earth, we don't have any clean water, we don't have any clean air, we don't have any clean soil, we die. Our whole species dies. So, given between these two hypotheses, I'm going to go with the Gaia Mother hypothesis, not the heaven hypothesis.
There are many underlying and subtle things presented in this movie, one of which is the new agey Mother Earth type belief that's being formed in our society, the whole tree hugging thing. And to that, let me just say, the Bible is very clear that God gave man dominion. So don't get that confused and don't fall for that stuff.
The Bible was written at least 2,000 years ago, and probably written in a concession. And they're all stories. They're not literal stories. They are analogous, symbolic, meaning stories. It's funny how you see symbolism and meaning everywhere, but you don't see it in your own Bible.
But the underlying thing in this is they are worshiping all that is Pandora, all that is the representation of Saturn, all that is Lucifer. They are worshiping Lucifer. Do you see how it all comes full circle? And it gets way more blatant than that. In the movie, their deity that these giants worship is referred to as Iwa. Where do you guys think that name came from? Iwa. Iwa comes from the word Awa, which comes from the word Awas. Awas, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly or not, but Awas is a mysterious being summoned by Aleister Crowley and his former mentor.
Whatever this name is from Avatar, Iwas or whatever, means Iwas or whatever it's supposed to mean. That's what it means. Awas, which was Aleister Crowley's guardian angel, who gave him the Book of the Law, is Aleister Crowley's guardian angel. There's no mythology, there's no history, there's no other reference to Iwas. Iwas, again, was Aleister Crowley's guardian angel, who conveyed to him the Book of the Law. That's it.
It's often called under the code name of dragon, but also referred to itself as something similar to an angel. Guys, Awas is Lucifer, the same Lucifer, or at the very least demon, that Aleister Crowley communicated with.
Lucifer is Lucifer. Awas is Awas. Again, two separate, distinct things, not the same thing.
And you can believe what you want, all right? But Aleister Crowley really did communicate with demonic spirits. So we have this planet that represents Saturn.
No, you are associating this planet with Saturn, and you are associating these creatures with demons. You, again, are projecting this onto this movie. It is not what the movie actually represents.
We have these indigenous giants who represent demons worshiping the planet, which represents Lucifer, and they even call this satanic deity by name. Now, this is going to get a little advanced, but I want to move to this wormhole aspect of the movie as well while we're on the subject of Saturn. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, then I suggest you guys try and do a little bit more research on it. But there are supposedly pressure points all around the globe that somehow connect the Earth to Saturn. And it is theorized that fallen angels come from Saturn and travel through the wormhole. Now, I don't know how much of that is true and how much isn't, but the satanic occult definitely believe this.
No, they are not. No one actually believes that there are satanic beings from the planet Saturn that somehow travel to this world through pressure points. No, you're the only fucking idiot who believes this shit. I have never ever come across it in any occult book I've ever read. And no, it is not what the occultists or satanic occultists believe.
And it is also represented in this movie. Now, this wormhole or Stargate, if you will, depiction also contributes to this whole idea of transhumanism. People prolonging their life by uploading their conscious thought into another biological being or computer program or what have you. So if we now move our attention to this scene, you can see these domes, which are all laid out in a very specific manner that clearly illustrates yet again the Stargate theme throughout this movie. But I want you to focus on these dragon-type creatures that they're flying. Now, the Bible sometimes refers to dragons, and most of the time when the Bible is referring to dragons, it's talking about dinosaurs, although sometimes it's talking about the serpent. Whereas when the occult talk about dragons, they're almost always talking about the serpent. In this movie, these winged creatures that they fly are absolutely representing flying serpents. They act and behave very similar to serpents. For example, in this scene, you can see them going into the snake pit, and in this scene, you can even see the fangs in these creatures that behave exactly how snake fangs behave. And while we're on the topic of fangs, we might as well go ahead and mention the vampirism theme in this movie as well. At an earlier point in this movie, when the psychic is first introduced, and also mentioned the noose around her neck, symbolic of the Freemason initiation.
I knew somehow they'd have to somehow throw the Freemasons in here. just throw it all in here.
But when this psychic is initially introduced, you see her savoring this guy's blood. And when you take into account that they all have these vampire-type fangs, well, there you go. Now, jumping back to these flying serpents, we can again see the underlying theme of crossbreeding, which in this movie they actually refer to as a halo. Halo is another term or symbol used by the occult to represent the stargates.
No, halos throughout, Christian art and Greco-Roman art and even Eastern art has always represented beyond human, greater than human, either spiritual enlightenment or spiritual knowledge or somehow sacred and separate from humans. Usually it's a full body glow, or as in the case of Christ or the Buddha or other Hindu deities, there is a halo around the head representing the greater knowledge, the spiritual knowledge.
But it's interesting that in this movie they have these cat-like humanoids fusing their DNA somehow with these flying serpents.
In the movie, what it is it's some kind of an empathetic or some kind of a symbiotic relationship that they actually bond with their soul or their mind. They bond with these creatures. That is why when the human character, who's actually in the body of an avatar, has such a hard time communicating, connecting with this other worldly creature, and when he finally does, it's a big, exciting part of the movie. But that is what it is. It's not a hybrid, some kind of transferring consciousness into another being. It's again, an understanding a symbiotic relationship, again, kind of symbolic, my interpretation, of course, of our connection to the natural world and how the natural world is also connected to us. But please, go on. I did not mean to interrupt your making shit up.
Keep in mind, again, that cats and serpents hold very interesting connotations in Egyptian mythology as well as the occult. Next, let's move our attention to the Tree of Souls. This mystical tree that is portrayed in this movie as a willow tree has all kinds of connotations in itself. The willow tree, or willow wood, is used in ceremonies intended for enhancement of psychic abilities, honoring the moon, as well as increase the essence of love in our lives.
So, did you go to like some random occult or witchcraft website and get this information? Because it sounds like you're reading it off of something. Again, the willow tree can represent all sorts of different things depending upon the projection of the individual.
It has moon connotations, so that takes you back to Isis. And anyone who doubts that Hollywood is fully aware of all of these occult meanings behind all of these different things that they put in their movies, just keep in mind that they specifically chose a willow or a tree that looks like a willow tree as a focal point in this movie where the psychic worships from and conjures up spirits from. Also keep in mind that the only love scene in the movie happens in the middle of the willow tree. They know exactly what this stuff represents, guys, and they are deliberately putting it into these movies. Now, also, the willow tree, due to its slender branches and narrow leaves, is also associated with the serpent.
What? Is that what it said on this witchcraft or occult site or wherever you got this information, that willow trees are associated with serpents? Wow, okay. If you say so.
There's the serpent again. And there's also a connection to be made between the femininity of the willow tree and the serpent to equate to the goddess of the underworld, but I digress. Another tree portrayed in this movie is where all the natives live. It is described as having outer columns and the inside comprised of an outer circle and an inner circle. And then he describes it as having a spiral leading up the middle of it. He talks about the columns, which are very significant in the occult. He talks about the outer circle and the inner circle, talking specifically about the illumined ones, the Illuminati. And he mentions the spiral, again talking about the Stargate or the Freemason ladder connecting this world to the next.
Again, you seem to be completely missing. I think one of the big problems here is you only have one form of mythology that you read every single thing in the entire world into. And so your understanding and your vision of the world is a pinhole. It is a very narrow viewpoint of everything. If you look at world mythology, let's say, for example, the Norse mythology of the Yggdrasil, the world tree, the tree that connects the upper and the outer world. Basically, it is the tree of life. If you look at this tree in Avatar through that mythology, or that symbolism, then it takes on a different meaning. But if you stare at it through your little pinhole concept of it, then you're only seeing a pinhole. You're not seeing the entire picture. Essentially, by only looking at your Bible and believing that it is absolutely the only thing that matters or has any purpose or meaning in your life, you are essentially shutting out every single other mythology and symbolism in the entire world.
And the last major point I want to bring up is the depiction of the apocalypse that this movie portrays. The movie subtly describes it as the place the eye does not see, and it is depicted as a barren wasteland. So there you go, guys. Those are just some of the main things that I wanted to mention to you about the movie Avatar. There are some other satanic symbols that I didn't have time to get into. For example, the compound that the imperial state claims as home base is in the shape of a pentagon, which of course is representative of the satanic pentagram. And there's other things like that all throughout this movie. It is a very satanic and occult-driven movie. And hopefully I did a decent enough job explaining some of the things to you. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you.
So this was a video that was referred to me by Jimmy Bettis, or Brony103. So thank you so much for referencing this video to me. If there's any videos that you would like me to do a video response to, please send me an email to this email address below. Thank you so much, and blessed be.